over money. Put your morals over money.
We will uphold against anyone that stands against us.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Truth Trumpet. I'm Steve G. This is Jeremy Palco, and this is Elton Robinson. And today we are going to be discussing the district school board in the area and the Parents for Parents rights, which Elton will talk about in a few minutes. First, I'd like to address something serious and somber. A friend of ours passed away this last week. Suddenly, and we'd like everybody to, if they can, pay their respects. There'll be his name is Derek Souye. He's 32 years old, a father of three, a 3-year-old, Julian. Talked about his, he was involved behind the scenes in the freedom movement. He was extremely encouraging to me and Beth in the municipal elections, and for myself in the Ontario elections. He was an avid fighter for freedom. He was a very intelligent man that did extensive research, the type of research that most people don't have the time, energy, or drive to want to do. He was a kind soul that was courteous to everybody he met. And he was a pleasure to be around. It's just a travesty that someone so young and a good person has left this earth. And if anybody would like to celebrate his life, there'll be first a funeral at Anderson Funeral Home Friday, this July 7th at 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. The visitation service is at 3 p.m. And the celebration of Derek's life will be the following day, Saturday, July 8th, 5 p.m. Till whenever, maybe midnight, at 4810 Wyandotte Street East, commonly known as the Green Room or Town and Country. Everybody would like to see your face to pay respects, and there is a GoFundMe page as well. Which I don't have that information at the moment, but there's a GoFundMe for Derek if anybody would like to donate for the funeral costs to be covered, just to help out with him. Having said that, we'd like to get into talking about really the main points of the sexualization of the curriculum and the education system or indoctrination system right now. So, Elton, why don't you take the lead here and start off with what is Parents for Parents Rights?
Parents for Parents Rights is a group started back in September this year when I became aware of some of the issues that were going on in schools. That I had a parent council meeting for my child, and I researched, and when I came across what the people were saying at our parent council, I came across a gender identity and expression policy that I never knew existed that came out in June 2021. It's regardless of age, your child can change their gender, their expression, and get an accommodation regardless of age without the school having to notify you. So basically, my 4-year-old, whose name is Gabriella, could change her name to Gabriel, and we would never know. They would ask Gabriella before they called home and said, "Hey, are we calling you Gabriella or Gabriel?" So that's where I started. A couple of my other co-founders are into the books that are in the schools that we uncovered a lot of age inappropriate books, and this is a rabbit hole I never wanted to go down, but this is a rabbit hole that hasn't ended. I really thought after I spoke in front of the school board in November. I thought I'd been done by December, but 8 months later, and we're still at it.
Mm.
And I'm meeting great people like you. Thank God, guys like you were way ahead of the curve on me on any of this stuff. So,
Well, like you just stated, the thing about the general human nature quality of most parents is, you've stated before, Jeremy, that people, everyone has their own lives. People are busy. They have work. They have multiple children. They have a lot going on. Maybe elderly parents of their own that need care. So their time is divided. And then, of course, there's always the enjoyment of the miscellaneous things that people enjoy that occupy their time, instead of focusing on some of the things that are just harder things we don't want to look like. We don't want to believe exist. We don't want to think.
I really trusted. You think you could trust in your political people, right? But to be honest with you, who really knows what a trustee is, number one? Number two, who even remembers who they voted for as trustee, right? Let me tell you what, if they had to come to my door and said, hey, we're going to do this policy and we're going to have these age-inappropriate books and we're going to go to universal bathrooms and the list goes on and on, I think we might dig a little deeper, because prior to this, and I've talked to a lot of people, I've dealt around Canada now with different school boards, and this isn't just a Greater Essex County District School Board issue.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of school boards that are like this or worse as far as hiding these things, which I don't understand why they got to hide, because there is a center. But again, going back, the trustee is the last vote. It won't be again for Greater Essex County if I have anything to do with it. I really want to educate the public over the next 3 years. We want to start looking for candidates hopefully around March next year to run for trustees, because it's the only way we can do it. Our school boards have been infiltrated by activists. So we have to put a counter push on. They've been doing this for over 20 years. So we have to put a push to get it back, the pendulum back in the center, right? Because again, it is a secular school board. But on the same token, you can go to the Catholic school board, has a lot of issues too. Not as bad as the public school board, but it's getting there as these teachers come out of the universities that are indoctrinated at the university.
It seems like it's a neck and neck race.
Oh, the activists took over everything.
Yeah.
Because again, I always trusted in government, right? I trusted in the government enough to take one shot just to get my life back, right? Just to get going. I'm going, it's got to do something, right? I know I put work.
How bad could it be, right?
Yeah,
when you have the trust, it's like, well, maybe they're not. Maybe they won't be correct on the effectiveness, but they wouldn't possibly be trying to harm
100%.
or anything nefarious.
When you guys were down on the flag, I thought you guys were crazy.
Sure.
Right? Until after I took the shots, and then they had the thing down there where Trudeau wouldn't even come out and talk to anybody before it turned into a circus down there, right? And then I think it was like a month later, he was saying nobody was forced to take the shot. And I'm like, excuse me. So then I woke up, and then you guys, kudos to you guys, were way ahead of the curve on all this.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'll say is that I think we've had a betrayal of trust at all levels of government. So federally, provincially, municipally, and within the school board. Parents vote and they say, okay, go do your job. But these trustees apparently don't know their job. First and foremost, the kids have to be safe and healthy. But if they're not safe and healthy, the parents are not going to send them to that school. But obviously that's all hindsight now. But those trustees are elected by these parents who are busy at home, like we talked before, making dinner, doing homework, getting them ready for bed, making sure they're washed, cleaned, and going to get a good night's rest so they can go to school the next day and hopefully just learn reading, writing, arithmetic, when instead they're being sexualized by perverts.
Yeah. And I understand if you're a parent, right? If you're a parent that happens to be listening to this that isn't already privy to this information, the first thought I understand in your head is, okay, come on, that's taking it a step too far. Like,
want me to tell you a story?
Well, right, but and you can. But my point is, I get it. Most parents have that kind of. They have a ceiling of protection that, well, there's the teachers, and surely the teachers wouldn't propagate or teach certain things if their morals, if they saw something that came across their desk. And even if the teacher didn't, you have the principal, and even if it wasn't the principal, you have the superintendent, and so on and so forth. And then it goes up the political chain of command from there. So people just assume there will be a stop check for anything that might not be curriculum based from what we went to school for. But my question is, this seemed to be a cut and dry issue. If we took one of the books that we're going to be talking about and dropped it down in front of a 1984, let's say, teacher, right? Like my mother, who was one of the best in my opinion, and we dropped it down in front of her and every other teacher, principal, superintendent, they would be appalled, disgusted. There's many adjectives we can come up with, but none of them would be in a positive sense. Not one. There wouldn't be one person, I can guarantee that, of someone who grew up within the school board and school system. I was in schools before, an hour before every student, an hour after. I was at the school board, what do you call
On
it?
Park Street.
Yeah, I was there on a weekly basis. I interacted with teachers when I didn't care or mean to, and I saw things that I can remember and put those type of pieces together. So it's nowadays you drop that same book down, and of course you're going to have a whole mixture of people. So what happened? What happened? Is it a moral slip? Is it an ethical slip? What is it that makes even someone like my mom, if I drop that book, and I have in front of my mother today, she has cognitive dissonance. She sees like, it's like, I don't like what I'm seeing. But if they're teaching it, like it must be, it's inclusive, it's approved, all of a sudden the buzzwords.
There is a spot for some of this stuff, but not to be on the library shelves. A teacher's resource, because you have to come to the facts, even though I might not agree with it. We are a secular school system, so there is children getting raised with they, thems. There's children getting raised with mom and moms, dads and dads, right? So if a child does say, hey, this, right, that's when a teacher, because I had a friend that's a very good teacher, and she's for not some of the books, right, but some of the books that we're going like, why are they even here? So I had her explain it to me, right? And so can you tell me why these books are there? And she goes, if there is a child that's like that, right, that's where she would go and grab a teacher's resource and show the child, right? Not the whole class, though. And that's the scary part when you have these new teachers coming out that have been indoctrinated by the activists through university and everything else, right?
But, okay, so you're saying that, excuse me, that a teacher would, if there was a particular student.
If a child prompts the question.
Right, if a child prompts a question, then the teacher, out of their special drawer or allocated closet, will pull
There's
up
an
this.
actual resource room that teachers have that is separate material.
Sure.
That's not in the general library.
Do you believe that that's the actual case?
That
in
isn't what's
schools?
happening, and that's what the issue is, right? That is
So-
the problem.
That it's either being put on the shelves generally
Right.
with the
But a
library
person
books.
like you were saying, like your mother or somebody back in the 80s,
Mhm.
would think it would be just in the teacher's resource. They wouldn't think they could just walk into the public library at their school
Sure.
and see the books. And not only are these books just on the shelf, they're front and center for the kids to see the
I know.
books.
So if this is being promoted generally
Yes.
across the media and politically as inclusive and good, then is it a stretch? Am I stretching to say that if there were activist teachers and the narrative is
It's
it
not
is
an if,
good?
brother.
Well, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So if there's an activist teacher or teachers
Or
in a
librarians.
school or librarians, and it is a positive, these books are positive, this inclusiveness push is positive according to the mainstream, then what would the modus operandi be of someone who's an activist and know they're at school, they see the book is, let's say, actually in the resource closet? Wouldn't they be inclined to be a hero and maybe put it on the front of the library shelf to make
It's
sure?
funny you're saying this because there's one book that we know we've been pushing it since I think we started talking about it in October. Oh, actually, no, we started talking about it in September. It's How Mamas Love Their Babies, and it introduces a stripper mom as a job, right?
Mhm.
which I'm not naive enough to know there is, right? But there's 52 of these books in our Greater Essex County District School Board. So we asked about it. The first meeting, they said we didn't even have a book, such a book. And the person that answered that question was actually the person that sent the email out. It was a 30-pager mailer of all the new diversity, equity, and inclusion books to be put on library shelves, not as a teacher's resource. So as we kept pushing meeting after meeting after meeting, it became that it was a teacher's resource, right? That's what it was meant for. But we know it's not. We have the documentation, right? So anyways, what you're saying there, yes, a librarian, we know at a school, did do that and put it out front. It is supposed to be a teacher's resource now, but they have it out on the shelf where a kid can still just go and grab it.
Okay, so the rule, it's supposed to be in a resource closet. It was found.
Once the superintendent deems it that it's a teacher's resource, yes.
And it was found.
Yeah.
At least one particular time
Yes.
in the library.
We also have pictures of this book where it's not. So they put a warning label on the book. This book we could do a whole other podcast on.
It's amazing.
Oh, it's absolutely insane.
So this teacher or someone at the school was punished in some way because they went against the policy or code of the school by taking it out of the teacher supply area. And
No.
No
Because
punishment?
Because it's not diversity, and it's not equity,
yeah.
and it's not inclusion. And equity is not equitable. Anybody listening to this podcast, I urge you to look up the difference between equity and equitable.
Well, we shared the actual definition of DEI, right?
Yeah.
Discrimination, inclusion, and indoctrination.
Yeah.
Right, that's real DEI. That's what's really being practiced. They use buzzwords because they sound good, but obviously it's just the face of the monster. But to say too, though, initially I think it looked positive in terms of what was happening in November.
Oh,
December,
yeah.
because 2 books.
Well, there was 5 books we talked about. They removed 2 books. Of course, they didn't say anything. CBC did an article saying we were banning books, and the trustees made it sound like, but they actually did end up taking 2 books out. It's Perfectly Normal and Fun Home they took out, which are really, really graphic. In fact, if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see we have billboards behind the speaker with these pictures of these books. And then 3 other books they've knocked down the amount of titles. This book is gay, push. And,
This book is gay, push. So say the name of the titles if anybody wants to write them down, look them up for yourself, see if they exist.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What are the names?
It's Perfectly Normal, Push, Fun Home.
Looking for Alaska.
This book is gay. Looking for Alaska, they still haven't done anything with. It's in like 18 elementary schools, which it should only be in high school.
What are your pronouns?
Yeah, what are your pronouns?
Which is kindergarten to like 2 or 3.
Yeah, JK to grade 3.
A lot of
If
these.
you want, I can send you stuff. We have all the screenshots of when they were in the schools, because now if you look up It's Perfectly Normal or you look up Fun Home, it shows they're not in there. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other books I can give you.
But it shows the true character of the trustees in that the requests that were being made were quite simple. It's like post a list of all the new releases for the current year that are being put on the shelves in the libraries.
Like Netflix, when a new book gets added in the library,
Just show the list.
because we found out, so we did it at our parent council. We got a book, said, hey, can we add this to the library? They said, yeah. They didn't even vet the book. And then we found out anybody can put a book in. A librarian can put a book in, a teacher can put a book in.
Interesting.
There's no process to put a book in. Now, there is a process to take a book out, but they're not going to take it out just because it goes against our Christian values, right? They'll say, well, it needs to be in there for another reason.
But at the same time, Nancy Armstrong asked
With
an
the
excellent question. She said,
Yes.
these books do not meet our curriculum. How do they ultimately, after her explanation, her research and all that, they asked her, said, okay, all right, Trustee Armstrong, what is your question? And she said, these books do not meet the curriculum criteria. How do they end up on the shelves of our libraries? There was never given an answer given. It's a simple question.
Yeah.
It's a simple question, and what the trustees are not doing, the superintendent is not doing, proves, and then just their true intentions. They don't have the best interest of the kids in mind.
My personal opinion is and this is why we got to get new trustees in there, is the trustees there, I don't think they realize the what their role is. Their role is to make sure the school board is doing their job, right? But a lot of trustees are ex-teachers, ex-librarians, so they've worked with a lot of these superintendents and directors of educations, right? So much so, a lot of them, I think, still think they work for the school board. When they're not there, they're there to govern the school board. And the other thing is the school board will blame it on the current government because they don't like the Ontario PC. School boards, as of right now, are ran by themselves independently. They get funding from the Ontario government and it grant student needs. It's called a GSN. Everything, the director of education can just run buckshot and do whatever they want to do. Bill 98 that they just introduced, and it's gone to royal assent and it'll be law soon, is going to change that. And I know it's a good bill because the OPSPA, which is the board of all the trustees, which is totally captured by activists too, is totally against this bill. So I'm figuring if the trustees that we have at our place don't like it, it's got to be a good bill.
Yeah, but I wouldn't give them the trustees who are currently the sitting trustees that easy of an out though, because anybody who gets a job, you really don't know what the job is like until you start, until day one.
Yep.
Right. So you're learning on the job, and just like we've heard, I mean, Linda Chin, second term, Nancy Armstrong, she's new to it.
Yep.
But some of these other trustees, they know exactly what's going on. They know their role, and that's where some of the newer ones, I would say right. No. The ones who have been, and even if you are new, well, get up to speed.
Well, you got a perfect example. Julia Burgess is our OSPA representative, right? If you go back, and this is public record, is she's the one that promoted the pride flag. So in 2015, Walkerville put it up.
Yeah.
Before it was even like a
old school
regulated thing, right? But Julia Burgess actually teamed up with this teacher that was there and brought it forth to bring it to the secondary schools first. And then in 2019, they decided that, hey, we're going to fly it at all the schools. So we were one of the first school boards to fly the pride flag, right? And again,
how progressive.
Yeah.
To me, that's a cancerous word.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
But as a trustee, as an elected representative, like, I mean, if you're new to some other job and it's sort of like, you know, you're quasi interested or you're volunteering, there's a different expectation level. But if you're a representative of the people and you've been elected, you signed up for it. Go figure out what your job is and go do it. And they have no excuse for what they're doing. Zero, none. Not a single one of them.
But again, it's a lost vote. And the worst part is I've been talking to a lot of people, Christian brothers and sisters. As you know, we all go to different churches, right? And we know different people because we've been Christians for a long time. And they're shocked with the video I show them because they're like, and I'm like, yeah. I said, we got to start really focusing and asking hard questions of our trustees at all candidate meetings before we vote for them. Because a lot of these people have been put in by most Christians vote, and we voted for these people.
And I guess in the voters' defense, even though it is on us to know who we're voting for every time, all the time, but we've been on cruise control for a long time.
Oh, 100%.
And it was kind of like, oh, things have been pretty chill. But now it's hit the fan.
Yeah.
And so now the good thing is people are showing up, just like at the protest, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah. The protest was just unbelievable.
Want to comment on that? Maybe.
Yeah. So that protest was just unbelievable. But I'm going to tell you something I learned about the media. I'm not watching any mainstream media anymore. I'm done. I had a thing with the municipal election, voter cards missing in our area in South Walkerville, and they didn't publish everything we said. They just took bits and pokes to blame it on the mailman. Mm-hmm. Well, if a mailman missed that many houses, he would have been fired a long time ago before that. Okay. But so we had the protest on June 20th at the Greater Essex County District School Board, which originally is supposed to be just a Jericho walk for Christians. And then we're going to end the meeting in peaceful thing, right?
Absolutely.
To show them that we want to work with them, right?
Yeah, that's the point.
So, anyways, you guys all know what happened. They ended up shutting us out because they said we were, what were the words they said we were?
Well, they were concerned that we were going to be disruptive, vulgar, offensive in some way, perhaps violating human rights. Who knows what.
Yeah, which we've never We never
That's-
seen it.
They
What did
were
you
never
do?
threatened. They were never threatened.
So you didn't, the previous board meeting that had
Oh, yeah,
public allowed.
So 2 meetings.
That happened.
Two meetings before that meeting, there was a motion on the table that Linda Chin brought up to have a committee of parents, trustees, teachers to review books of
That
concern.
sounds like a good idea.
Right? Well, I know 8 months later.
Seems
Right?
reasonable.
You think it's something they would have done right away,
Take
but
it
again,
offline.
she's tried 3 other motions that they killed, right? But anyways, so these guys like Jeremy, and there was 2 other people that were going to speak. Well, those speeches take a good speech. It's only 5 minutes, so it takes 2-3 hours to write one of those speeches, right? Well, at 5:30, you're not allowed in there till 7. At 5:30, they went into the room. So if you're watching on YouTube, you think it happened at 7 o'clock, but it didn't. It happened at 5:30. So these guys come in at the 7 o'clock meeting, unbeknownst to them, that they took it off the agenda, and they didn't even say anything about it. So I can understand some frustration, but I had political friends that were there that I asked to go to the meeting that are lifelong politicians, and they sat in there and they could not believe. So what happened, and then the best part is I really got bummed out going back to the June 20th thing of when they locked us out, but it was the best thing ever that happened, right? So anyways, to go back to that, with the media, so CBC and CTV called me and asked me if I can be there at 5 o'clock. I said, I can't be there at 5. We're supposed to be there at 6. I can meet you there at 5:15. But I didn't even think about it. The counter protesters were supposed to be there at 5:30. So I showed up. Guess when they interviewed me?
Right before.
At that time, right? And then the Windsor Wright put there was dozens and dozens of people. CBC said there was only 100 people, right? Well, I tell you what, at 6:30, I know you guys couldn't find me. I was in my car crying tears of joy because the night before I couldn't sleep because every time I fell asleep, I thought it would just be me and 2 people, right? and then I woke up and the counter protest, so I wasn't even thinking when they called me, right? But we ended up with like 450 people on our side. It was just unbelievable. And walks of life. And they want to say diversity, equity, and inclusion.
That's too short.
They had a look at the side. The counter protesters are all white.
I wish they would have shown. I don't watch CBC anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Not even to.
Yeah.
I don't even check them out anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. CNN, I rarely even check out anymore.
Well, I thought
even
you'd be
for
big on
counter.
that with that
Yeah, I know.
thing
It's
on your
just
sleeve there.
the usual. But see, I'm wondering if they panned and showed the diversity of the crowd, not the ones
Well,
who were
the
wearing
crowd wasn't
rainbow.
even there by the time 6:30 was there. They were long gone.
They really were orchestrating it to make it like hearing what you just said.
Yeah.
To isolate Elton, to have all the counter protesters there before 6 o'clock, so that it looked like he's
Just him.
A man on
it's
an
all
island.
them.
he's the minority, the fringe minority that Sarah Sipkar was referring to.
Yes.
So they're all trying to fulfill their own lie, but it didn't work. I mean,
And then you know what CBC did? AM 800 did a poll about the secret policy.
Yeah.
It was 96%, I think, or 94% were on our side, and 4 or 6% were on their side. So when they figured they couldn't do it anymore, they just dropped it, right? But a couple of days later, I think it was the Windsor Star had an article come out and said the universities need to get more teachers because teachers are quitting. And you know why they're quitting? Because of parents.
Well, because parents are starting to get more.
I know a lot of teachers. That ain't why teachers are quitting. The teachers that are quitting are the teachers you want teaching your kids. They can't take the pill anymore.
Yeah.
right.
I have a friend that his wife is a mental health person there. She can't even do her job. She's done it, and she gets reprimanded. So she has a kid that thinks he's a frog, right? So she goes, how's it going? How are you feeling? He goes, ribbit, ribbit. She's been beat down so much that she writes ribbit, ribbit on there because if she puts anything else, she gets ostracized because how dare she say anything because that's a queer trait and that kid has human rights to be
Well, he's
whatever he wants to
identifying.
be.
He's identifying.
Yes.
Right, but you said a
Queer trait is what they call it.
right. So they're trying to expand, like hence all the colors on the
Yes.
rainbow. They're trying to expand their reach to try to get everybody to come into this, basically a homosexual special interest group.
So that's what
They're
Yeah,
trying to draw.
they're trying to do
because what they're
identi-
trying to do.
They're trying to do
disabilities.
identity politics is what they're
They're
trying to
trying to do disabilities at some point. There was
That part I can't tell you.
They
Well,
were
if you
going,
can label anything under hate or not including, then that eventually, yes, by default, it will fall under an alphabet umbrella because they'll.
I wish
They'll
I was
encapsulate
back in grade 6 because you know what I'd be doing? Say I'm Maverick from Top Gun and I want a fighter jet out in the schoolyard.
I would trust me.
I
At
like
some
that
point,
one.
I'll have my own little discussion about this. About
Yeah,
high school Steve.
yeah,
But
exactly.
high school Steve would have taken this ball and ran with it
Oh, it's,
with ease, and it would have been fun for me for a little bit. But who knows how I would have ended up now? I'm happy.
well,
Happy where I am
look what
now.
happened to Josh Alexander.
Mhm.
Right? He tried to protect girls from having boys go into their bathrooms because they told him because nobody else was responding. So he
The
acted-
girls in the room asked. They had a conversation
Yes.
with him.
yes, because they weren't comfortable.
Yeah,
going
so
to research.
because nobody was responding, so then Josh stepped up. So you have a young man, very young man, he's 16, stepping up because the men in the school wouldn't do it. That is the really sad part. Like there is a side to this where it's like the men need to show up. We need the dads. The moms are there. The mamas bears, they come out. Not all the time. I mean, the gallery's pretty empty because, like we said before, parents are busy. But we need the dads to show up. It changes the conversation in a good way.
Absolutely. I can speak from the freedom movement, and I've said it before with the bullhorn. There are some men. I mean, we're a room full of 3 men right now. So there are men. So men listening, I'm not talking about you, but there's been something consistent over the past few years that I've noticed, and it is a plethora of women who are willing to step up to the plate, be mama bears, ready to protect and do the right thing. Sacrifice, like you were saying, that's kind of a common thread.
Yeah.
These teachers, do you think they want to give their pension up? Ironically,
Oh,
do
buddy.
you think?
You
I mean,
ever
they're
heard
probably a
of
little older.
Carolyn Pajorski?
Tell me.
She's a teacher out of Waterloo Regional District School Board. She went in around COVID to talk about a book 5 days away from retirement. Same kind of conversation as Nancy Armstrong had. They shut her down for harmful. She just started her presentation too. She didn't even get into saying anything. Very professional lady.
Yeah.
She went to school the next day. She was suspended. A couple days later, she lost her license and she lost her pension.
But
5 years, 5 days away from retirement.
How horrible of that is to actively. We see that's
Yeah.
another common thread.
And
that
it
we
just
see
went
they-
ahead to the. We should know next week, hopefully, what the ruling is from the Ontario Supreme Court.
They want to. The narrative pushes this agenda so hard
Oh,
that it almost demonizes the righteous or virtuous person, and all the observers viewing get the opposite wrong impression, like an inverted impression of what's right
Yeah.
instead of what's wrong.
It's
Yeah.
spin, just like what they're trying to do to Elton at our last protest. It's all spin. They're trying to say, okay, just show this angle so they don't see, the crowd over here.
Right.
And they
We've seen media manipulate, like
Oh,
like I said, CNN. They do these things
old
that the
tricks.
viewer, if you're not aware, you wouldn't know. How would you know that they would set times up and
That's
kind of
what
manipulate the timing? So he would show up and it would just be him before all the rest of the protesters come. And then those counter protesters, they're looking like massive good guy, colored hair, they, them crowd versus the fringe minority, as you stated. But that's optics. They're trying to create the optics and really create a straw man of someone.
Smoking
so
mirrors.
there's a gentleman. I'm sure you guys heard of him. His name's Dan McDonald. He's on AM 800.
He was there.
So
Have
I've
I
been
heard
trying to
Dan
get a hold of
McDonald?
him since September. I even talked to. I had a function I was at with Greg LeMay, and I was saying, "Hey man, can you get me in front of Dan? Because I'm always good friends with Dan, right?" And I told him the whole story, right? So I'm not being homophobic. I'm not being a bigot. I want to talk to Dan. Me and Dan are the same age. When he was going to high school, hard time growing up. You know, like those guys getting shit kicked out of them. Pardon my French, sorry. Right? But I want to talk because there's a center to this, right? The work Dan and those guys have done since '97 or whatever has brought where the acceptance today, right? And I'm not saying accepting the lifestyle, but to have a civil conversation. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you wouldn't have that conversation, right? So that's what I'm saying. There's a center to the secret policy. But going to Dan, so Dan was the guy that did the counter protest. So I went up and shook his hand and said, "Hey, Dan, can we get on the air and talk?" Right? Mm-hmm. Still no response. Like he did the fluff, right? Yeah. Still, you think if he really wanted to talk about this by doing the polls and stuff,
they don't.
He would actually reach out and talk to me, right?
No, they don't. They
Yes.
don't. They don't want. They want to push their narrative from their.
They
side.
had a person on the radio the next day. Actually, I forgot to tell you this part. She said that they left because they left by 6:30. I think the counter protesters left. Right?
Right at 7, they were pretty much all gone,
gone.
but they fizzled quick.
But the one said that she didn't feel safe.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
The Vikings
people can
with
say
their
things. Yeah, the people that wear warrior garb in a way are the ones that say, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, cosplay or I can't remember. I used to say it all the time. I can't remember the name of what LARPing, LARPers, and they feel threatened. They have sword and shield, and other people have their voices, and
they tried.
So back to the protest here and the counter protest. I kind of wanted to just let at least this audience know and whoever shares this out, because there's the counter protest or the mainstream viewpoint that they try to push that, anybody who wants to not champion the narrative that's being pushed is in the category of bigot or hate, right? So, Jeremy, how would you crystallize the point to the people who are counter-protesting us, who just wanted to be able to have our voices as parents heard to the trustees of the school board? How their misconception of how either Christians or parents that don't agree feel, they're of the impression that we must hate them, where we want them, we want all sorts of negative things to happen to them. Explain
the sad thing is that the counter protesters are trying to make it about themselves. We were not there for them or about them. We were there and always there for the kids. Mm-hmm. We're there to protect the kids.
For our children.
Yeah, our children, but other people's children too. Like they're Bible says, love your neighbor. Those kids are my neighbor. And the idea that we were there in some way to offend them, they chose to kind of try and turn it on them. But if you actually spoke and say, hey, actually at the beginning I said, when I was on the mic and trying to, it became a yelling match, and I was like, whatever, game on. But it was like, I was like, time out. Can you we're here to express our freedom of speech. You're here to express your freedom of speech too. And you know what? We welcome it. We're happy to engage you, but could you please let us say what we're going to say? And they just got louder. So then I got louder, and it just became, it was all right. It was a battle. It was fine. We did our thing. They left. We won. But in the end, the sad thing is that, again, they were making it about themselves. They want not just tolerance and acceptance. They want affirmation of where they come from. And it's like, I'm not going to give that to you. But by the way, we're not even here. That's not what we're here for. We're here so that the trustees or anybody in the school system keep no secrets from parents and do not sexualize our kids. It's that simple.
And you don't need someone on the other side of the thought process. You may think, and you may have been taught, you don't need my, Jeremy's, Elton's, anybody's affirmation. You need no one's affirmation, nor do I need anyone's affirmation. We have a Canadian flag that has the Canadian Bill of Rights, which is meant for all of us. It's inclusive to all of us.
Every single Canadian.
Right? So that's including someone on the other side of the fence of the thought process or us. You don't have to affirm me, and I don't have to affirm you. I'll never affirm your lifestyle, and that's okay, because
you're not affirming ours.
Yeah, exactly. You don't agree, most likely, from what you assume my lifestyle is, and that's okay. You don't have to,
right?
As long as I'm not harming you, and you're not harming me, or my family, or going against the law. We can all come together, I would think, under that. Again, the problem, I think, arises, with the bad actors that are the authoritative figures or the parental figures, not real parents, but the parental step-in figures, teachers, doctors, nurses, all educators, the media, the TV shows you watch, the late night programs, the sports you watch, they are all pushing subtly and not subtly, depends on which, the same narrative, leading you to believe your way of thinking is the only way of thinking and right. And it is a way of thinking, but there must be room at the table for dialogue to bring the truth to light always.
I'll say this on the Canadian flag, though. The Canadian flag is inclusive, but the Canadian, it represents Canada. And Canada being a place where a lot of people want to come, right? To North America, was U.S. or Canada.
They did.
People they're actually running across the border. They want to be here, and that's good. There's a way to go about doing it responsibly, but of course, we welcome people. We are blessed by Canada. We want others to be blessed by Canada. There's a way to do that. Another topic for another day. But we'll say this, when it comes to the Canadian flag, it's inclusive, yes, but it's also just, as in it stands for justice. So in our charter, it says supremacy of God and rule of law. If these trustees did what they are doing, what they're promoting right now at the playground, they would be or should be arrested for it. You cannot open up one of these books that has pornographic sketches in it, and then, well, the parents are standing over there, got their backs turned to you, say, "Hey, kids, come over here. Let me teach you about your body and how you can have fun with it, and maybe with somebody else." You're gonna get tuned up. So, yes, the Canadian flag is inclusive, but I'll just make the point though, it's also just in that you cannot steal and rob a child's innocence and expect it to be okay with you. It won't be. Whether in this life or the next, it won't be.
Yeah, that will never change, even if it's what you think or the narrative being pushed.
The narrative being pushed is so bad that I had a transgender friend come up here, and I hate saying trans.
Body dysmorphia.
Well,
what I call it.
I call her. So she came and spoke to this secret policy, gave her lived experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think they would ask, if they were really interested in finding this center, you think they would ask. Not one person asked her a question. She drove 3 hours to come up here. But even worse, when she was in Waterloo talking about it, a trustee said to her, "I have a lot of friends that are trans. Wouldn't you say you're a minority in the trans community?" Right? And then our school board that preaches diversity, equity, and inclusion, Linda Chin, verbally a minority, appearance of a minority, and the KKK would treat her nicer than they treat her.
Oh, they're awful.
So they're pushing a narrative.
Well, I would go as far. I haven't read the policy and procedure of ethics.
Oh, Robert's rules, yes.
Yeah, in these board meetings, but I would venture to go on a limb and say that Mr. Leclerc broke certain guidelines or rules. I can't see that you can address somebody in a professional setting the way that it likened me to childhood, the way sometimes when my dad was real upset that he would, unload on me and lose kind of control.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't like it from an observable standpoint. I didn't like it that it was someone in a higher position of power and a white male at that, to a visible minority. Where is the mainstream, or where is the regular viewer when it comes to this particular narrative? Forget about your opinion on the topic. You have a white man in an authoritative position dressing down in repeatedly in a very negative, mean way.
Which is why at the meeting, that last meeting, actually, I had the mic, lost the mic, then used my outside voice, called him out for that reason. He needed to apologize to Linda Chin. And the sad thing is, all the other women on that board stood and watched it happen.
I sure hope they don't have daughters and accept that.
That's sick.
If their husband beats their daughters or something like that, right? But
in terms of decorum and professionalism, what you're referring to is Robert's rules and that sort of thing, right? But what Daniel Ableser, it's probably butchering his name, but anyway,
Oh yeah.
Daniel, what he said, Section 207, he called them out right there and then. He said, you're having an illegal meeting, close the illegal meeting, stop this, and then reschedule or reconvene at a later date, because this meeting, according to the Education Act of Ontario, is not supposed to be happening. And then I went further down too in Section 218. It says that trustees are to take the concerns of parents and the public to the board and to share that and address it. They're failing on multiple counts, and that's where, going back to the flag and that it also stands for justice. They are violating the Education Act of Ontario.
Daniel actually put an ombudsman process in.
Yeah, so it's not
Daniel
good.
is a lawyer.
Good.
But it's not just this sort of like, they said, we said, he said, she said, she said, he said. I'm getting lost in my pronouns, Stephen. But the whole point here is that they have legitimately, in my eyes, I'm not a lawyer, in my eyes, based on we'll call it a literal reading of the Education Act of Ontario as it is right now. Go look at it for yourself. Section 207, 218, as it reads, that is, and Gail Hatfield, as the chair, she ran an illegal meeting. They better clean up their act, because we got to come after them on that if that's the case. And people got to realize there's a lot of people out there, Christians, people of faith, otherwise, they think, well, if I'm nice, the bullies will stop. If you haven't learned this lesson yet in life, that's not how bullies work.
Nope.
It's time for us to get off our asses.
100%. Those bullies will continue to abuse you because you're letting them. But they are weak and they are cowards. Stand up to them, and we're the ones who are going to win. We have the truth on our side. I believe God is on our side.
But stand up to them kindly.
Yeah. Kindly, gently, strength under control,
Yes.
respectfully, but boldly, courageously. And I'm saying don't hold back the punches, because they're punching you in the face right now. They're punching your kids in the face. And if you saw what's happening right now, literally happening in public on the street, you would react in the moment. But because it's sort of like this behind the scenes, there's words we have for that, grim or whatever, right? There's heavier words I don't even want to use because I don't want to characterize people that way, because I don't think it's fair in this moment. But I think after conversation, I may think, yeah, that's fair. Point being, they're doing it in secret. People aren't seeing it, and it's out of sight, out of mind. But we're saying you need to bring it into sight, because this is happening, and kids are being violated.
Well, and it's Beth is going to load up some pictures in a minute of the parades that have been going on. Pride parades, Pride Month. There are many pictures that we chose not to load up because of the extreme nudity of this. So we don't want to load that. There'll be some nudity with some censor blurps over areas, but those are the milquetoast ones, the ones we're showing. But parents, if you're a parent who's unsure and you're just thinking, hey, inclusion, equity, what's wrong with a rainbow? And in the context that they're saying, my kid likes rainbows, so does mine. Every child, I would venture, likes rainbows and unicorns and all these things.
So do I.
The problem is,
Unicorns
I do too. He's got a great rainbow right on his shirt there. The problem is, parents, please try to imagine your child who's innocent, a beautiful child, goes to school to learn, right? The curriculum. And they're thinking about what children think about. Maybe they're thinking about the math that they didn't do yet. Maybe they're thinking about the science project that they started working on and intrigued their mind the day before that they want to start learning about. Maybe they're thinking about the game they played at home with their mom that they set up the night before, and they can't wait to get home to play that game. Or they're waiting to play on the curb next to their friend. Those are the things children think about. All children, all Canadian good children raised in a nuclear family that don't have trauma. That's what kids think about, right? What's for lunch? The good things, they're innocent. So even though you think that this movement, this push, not for adults, for children in the schools, is innocent, it's not, because those children are thinking these things that I mentioned And now we're dropping in these seeds that you think are innocent seeds. But the little seeds that are being dropped, Beth puts up on the screen here, this is what pride has turned into. Whether it started off that way, I think it did, because I was in Vancouver a decade or so ago, and these are all the things I saw that were labeled as family friendly.
How long ago was that?
Over a decade ago.
You seen this stuff back then?
Oh yeah, in Vancouver, because
Holy
Vancouver
crap.
is like the San Francisco of Canada.
Seriously?
San
Okay.
Francisco's been happening.
Yeah.
Got me something. Dude.
So as Beth scrolls through this,
Wow.
try to understand, parents, that when a seed, just a little question, it just has to be a question. Hey, little Sally, do you really believe that you're a girl? Don't you think you'd be happier as a boy? Now, Sally probably never thought that before. Sally's thinking other things, innocent things. But now Sally has that question rolling around her mind. Add these images and all the other context of what pride embodies, and those are the seeds that get planted, and then the kids start asking questions way ahead of time, right? It's different when a teen asks questions from things that they can't help but see and absorb in everyday life. They go downtown and they happen to see things, homeless people and other things like these parades. But when it's inserted as a positive in every media aspect, that's a problem. And that seed, understand this, parent, that seed can never be undone. It can never be taken out. The only thing for that seed to do is to grow. It doesn't mean, at the same respect, that your child will become part of the alphabet soup category.
Jeez.
It doesn't mean that at all. They might, but it doesn't mean that. But the seed will get planted, that innocence that I love seeing in my child, that I want to nurture and care for and keep that flame of innocence for as long as possible, so she can grow up to be the best adult, moral adult that she can be. But parents, if you stand by and do nothing, if you just think it's innocent,
It's not
you're
gonna go
robbing
away.
your own children of their innocence. And you can be angry at me now and think that the words I'm saying are hateful. Trust me or don't trust me. There is no hate in my heart when I say this. All I want is for my child and your children to maintain and retain their innocence for as long as possible, and for as long as you, the parent, have intended for your child. If you could raise them in your home and teach them, if all the worldly things were there where you had to earn money and all that stuff, if you could, you would keep that flame of innocence. And that's all I'm saying, is that's what we need to pay attention to, and not allow that seed to be inserted within the school system.
Yeah.
They're children.
And I would say too, like, it was proof there was no hate or fear at the last protest. We didn't leave, they did. And people within our group engaged them and tried to talk to them and have conversations with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the complete opposite of what we're being accused of. But all you can do is keep telling the truth, and hopefully people pick up what you're laying down.
Can I mention something too?
Sure can.
Parents, please, if you have an issue with the school, reach out to Parents for Parents' Rights first.
Where can they find Parents for Parents' Rights?
We're on the website, www.parentsrights.ca. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on
What's the title? What's the
the Twitter.
Handle,
I'll
yeah.
give it to you after, because that's my
Okay.
co-founder. Because that stuff.
okay.
Not Facebook.
No, we're not on Facebook.
That YouTube channel as well, is that?
YouTube channel too, and we have a mailer. So if anybody wants to mail out, they can just go elton.robinson1984@gmail.com and say, please put me on your email list, and we'll get there. But parents, please reach out to us before you deal with the school board. I'm finding parents are starting to reach out to us, and to go to your point you were talking about with children's innocence, it's so bad. Kids are actually getting mental health issues, not because they can't keep secrets. They don't see themselves in the school anymore. They see rainbows, mental health posters. They're like, Mom, Dad, where's me in this school, right?
A couple of the resources I'll add too, because we talked about children's innocence and how children, they need to be cared for. So make sure they go to school. They that they can't drive until they're of a certain age. They can't drink until they're of a certain age. They can't smoke until they're of a certain age.
Currently.
They tell the parents, you got to make sure that they're well fed. That they have if they go to school every day with Cheetos and pop, then the school's gonna say, hey, can you maybe switch up the lunches for them? Do something better. But when it comes to pronouns and mutilating their bodies, everything's cool. But if you go around the Campaign Life Coalition, and there are videos on there of these testimonies of these children who have walked through that process, who are now regret having made those decisions at such a vulnerable age, and some of them, I think they're taking legal action against the doctors who actually did this to them.
They are.
And so it's like that end game, and also all the data on people who are transgendered, their tendency towards violence. I'm not saying that just to as hyperbole try to make my case. I mean, it's out there. The data is available. It's for real. And if you deny the gender you're born with, I mean, how can you not have an eternal battle?
Let me jump in here, because my opinion on that is, when we handled things differently 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was a little more clear cut from a moral standpoint. You would have empathy for someone who has turmoil. They're obviously troubled, they're hurting, they're in pain, right?
Yes. Who doesn't want to help somebody?
Well, right. You could have someone, I'm remembering back in high school, I was fat, right? So I would get made fun of for being big, right? For being fat.
I stayed big.
It was weird. I was with the cool people, but at the same time, I got made fun of too. But you had goth, you had all different groups of people, and you could tell, I was an observer. I didn't talk a lot, ironically. I didn't talk a lot. And I observed, I'll use goth as an example, right? The people that were goth or identified, they didn't use that term back then, but the people that were goth, they looked sad a lot of the times. They looked not happy. If I'm not going to use a negative word, they didn't look happy.
They wanted attention.
Sure, but it's I would observe them and think, what is it you're missing in life? Okay, before you put on the long trench coat and the dark makeup and all the dark clothes, you were still sad. You were searching for something, and then you found a one person, two people, or a music maybe, or a style, and you thought, I'll try this, or I like it. I don't know. And you put it on. But I noticed the emotions that were exuded were the same, right? So that feeling of not being happy was still within those people, within whatever group they were identifying as. And back then, if you went to a counselor, or if someone noticed, you could have that heart-to-heart, you were taught that you were just mentioning. Look, son, however you talk to a child, or if you're a counselor, what is it that you feel you're missing in life? Is there, or what's happening at home? You would dig with real questions to find what maybe the issue is with them in their mind that they can actually address to resolve the issue. Where now we champion anybody that claims a identity or what I call a victimhood status. I'm not saying someone's a victim, but if you're saying I'm a minority, therefore please don't treat me in a certain way, you're forcing the system to elevate you.
You can use the victim part, though, because they're saying if they don't affirm these people, they're going to kill themselves. That's the card they go to every time. So you can call them a victim, but it sounds hard.
Yep.
But you can, because that's the narrative they push back on you when you say about questions.
And there are some who are, but there are many other issues to address. The amount of SSRI drugs that are pushed within the school system, the minute a child doesn't fit the model of sitting down for 7 hours plus the hour of lunch a day and facing the teacher and not getting up and not interrupting, that has grown exponentially over the years, over the decades, the amount of children being put on these psychotropic drugs, the SSRI drugs, which, regardless of how you feel as a parent of how that might have them sit and focus, look at it this way. Good or bad, you don't know the future, the 20-year outcome of your child. You know your child today. You put that SSRI drug, a chemical that changes, alters the neural pathways of a developing child, their neural pathways are developing until at least age 23 approximately, and you're changing that chemical development of that brain. From that moment on, your child will be different. And the longer they're on that drug, that's altering their brain patterns from their natural self of how they would have developed. Einstein couldn't sit in a classroom. Before I go off on a tangent, there have always been people who didn't fit in. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing to not fit in, but there's something there with growth. You can, when you notice, when you feel that you don't fit in, it forces you as a child to ask, hopefully, your parents questions, and you can go to them and they can be a rock for you, or your friends even, and hopefully their parents. Hopefully there's a network of parents who can morally guide that child back to a stable ground, because all children should be happy by default if they're given the tenets. I believe it's 5 tenets, right? The safety, roof over their head, food, nutrients, all those things. Yeah. All children have a base of happiness. It's up to us parents to drive that with our children. It's not up to teachers. It shouldn't be up to the teachers and the board.
I think everybody has a responsibility, but I would say you have a responsibility to steer it back to the parents. Even if a company becomes a teacher resource, the first stop for that teacher should still be steer the child back to the parents. Say, I noticed this. I read up on this. This is what they're saying to me. Inform the parent, and then say, parent, you go handle it. I teach at Harvest Kids. There's no way I'm going to try and usurp the authority of a parent or what to tell that child. I'll teach them that, what we're supposed to teach them in class. Have fun, engage them. I ask a lot of questions. I try, you try to trick them, mess with them, see if they can actually, just learn and have fun. And they love it. They light up over that kind of stuff. They like it when you mess with them just a little bit. But it's in a fun way that they're actually learning to discern the truth from a lie, right? But ultimately, if that child has a question and they're like, hey, and it goes beyond the gospel or what we're talking about, but they say, I really am not sure about, A, B, or C. Depending on what it is, I'll say, that's an excellent question. There are verses tied to this. Can you go? How about when you go home, ask your parents to maybe bring those verses out, read them with them, and then have that conversation with mom and dad. That's what my go-to is. And I think all teachers should be doing that. And most teachers, I would say, do want to do that. But the sad thing about when we get around to this pronoun baloney is that some of these teachers now, even though there is this what's happening in culture, I understand that. But now you're putting the teachers in a rough spot because the teachers don't support that. So I know of one teacher for certain had to be moved from a class because she wasn't going to use the pronouns. She couldn't, in good conscience, use the pronouns. So she had to be moved to a different class.
Another lady that sacrificed for...
Yes.
Oh, buddy, there's horrible stories.
And she's a good teacher. So she asked to be moved so she wouldn't be put in that situation. So they accommodated. But still, the whole thing is like, just call them by their name. It's awful. It's awful what the school boards are putting into these children's heads and then supporting and feeding that monster. They need to be checked hard.
What's horrible is we don't even know that policy existed.
Well, and the sick thing is...
You should have to sign for that policy, right? There should be some kind of notification because you're basically, when you sign your kid into school, you're giving your rights to your child to them, right? But you would never, ever think that they would take your parental rights away in any aspect in your child.
You wouldn't.
But to go back to what you're saying with the goth people, what about the tomboys? And I didn't even think about that until we have teachers that we deal with, and a lot of them are female, and a lot of them are in the sports. And they told me that when they were binding their breasts and stuff because they didn't feel. They said if they were going through school right now, they'd probably chop their breasts off, right? And it happens. Pierre Barnes is a good friend of mine. He's out of BC. I'll give you the link to his computer where you can see these surgeries to know that they're a fact. It's just not a hidden thing. And schools, since 2000 in Ontario, there's over 2,000 sexually assaulted charges against people. So much so in this Bill 98, Stephen Lecce said, if there is a sexual transgression, you know what they do right now, it's a 5 or 10 year suspension.
Hmm.
That teacher goes back to teach again. Now it's automatic. You lose your license for life.
Yeah.
Right? It's just, it's
but-
so horrible.
I mean, and then who wrote the policy?
Yes.
Sarah
Yeah.
Sipkar.
Yeah.
And she's the one, there literally is a line between paragraphs called out clearly. There is no age limit.
Regardless of age.
Regardless of age,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. The trustees have assumed the role of parents. It's like, get lost with that junk. But I think there's something we're supposed to bring it around home to here on
Yeah. So July 10th, or is it showing this right?
This is the Greater Essex County District School Board for the Gender Identity
I
Expression.
still remember
Student
when I
records.
got this sent to me, man, and I could not believe it when I seen it.
It's on page 2. Yeah. Right there it says there is no age limit.
It's twice in the.
Yeah, there is no age limit. Next paragraph down.
Read it out
There
loud,
is
please.
there is no age limit on making an accommodation request. Young students have the same rights to privacy and to accommodations made on their behalf, with or without their parents' guardians' knowledge.
Okay,
Flip it
so
over to the next page.
If you go to the next page,
Regardless of
yeah. Thank you, Beth.
This
This
is
is true regardless of the age of the student.
2.0 privacy.
So, again, parents, without don't let me go on a tangent here, but
Yeah.
parents,
That's Greater Essex County District School Board, by the way, just if anybody's wondering.
Yes, the
That's
Catholic
here.
school board has age guide limits.
currently, but the foot in the door was this whole entire COVID pandemic. They, because of all the Emergency Act measures that were taken, they were allowed to mess with people's minds and confuse people, really. And as you stated, and as we read, and as I proved on videos where you can see me talking to a superintendent at Roseville School on the east end of Windsor, where they had the mobile vaccine clinic surprising there to jab the children without parental consent.
Yeah.
So I was there, and I stopped a mother who's now a good friend from, well, she stopped her child from going there. I let her know, you said if you allow that child to go through the threshold of those doors today, when the mobile clinic is there, your child will most likely be back vaccinated, whether you want that or not, just so you're aware. She started yelling at me, didn't believe me, because that's crazy, right? She didn't approve it. She didn't get a letter. She didn't know anything. And surely if she wanted to go there and pull her child, she could. I let her know, no, you can't. They won't let you in to the doors unless they want to. And if that's the reason you're there, most likely they would try to prevent you from going in, because now they have ultimate control over your child while they're in that school setting. And that just is the policy right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's sad.
So,
But-
let's go to
Yeah.
now the future here. So we had a protest because we weren't allowed in. We weren't, the parents, public, weren't allowed to have their voices heard.
Well, originally it was going to be have the protest go into the meeting.
Yeah.
Then we got.
Well, it
voted.
wasn't a protest. It was a
It was
march.
it was a walk. It was
Christian
opposition,
Jericho walk. Yes,
but it was peaceful
but a
opposition.
peaceful. Yes.
Absolutely. So now, what is coming up? How, even though it's summertime and trustees are on vacation and summertime, woo woo, that's 2 months off.
Some of our new parents that were out there. They asked me on the 20th, when's the next one? I go, we're not going to do anything again until September 16th. We're going to do another information session, right? They're like, no, we got to do another one now. So, anyways, after Daniel Absler's video we seen and talking with the Muslims,
Yep.
We came up with this July 10th. We're
The
gonna be
Muslims
outside
who are
of-
there side by side with
side by
us.
side with us.
Yep.
For the child, they said it's something we can stand behind when we want to stand.
And there was people
Absolutely.
I'm sure there were people of
Oh,
other
there
faiths
was,
there
yes.
as well. I mean, it was whether it was Christians, Muslims, Jews.
2S LGBTQIA plus runners.
And I'm sure there were some atheists there who I call future Christians.
Yeah.
They were there as well, but it's a story for another day.
So
This is
we're gonna go outside of Lisa Gretzky's office. Now it's in a plaza, so they'll probably push this out to the sidewalk, which will even be better, so it's on Google.
Yep.
But me and Yvonne are gonna go into Lisa Gretzky's office and ask her what her opinion is on the unlawful lockdown of the Greater Essex County District School Board. Because Andrew Dowie's already said that he's totally against what they did, and it's not right. Lisa Gretzky's
Andrew
been,
Dowie said that.
Andrew Dowie said that.
He's a Windsor Tecumseh, but
Yes. So Lisa Gretzky's been silent. I sent her an email. She never got back to me. All the other MPPs in our area did.
Okay.
So she's the only one that hasn't responded. So we're going to come talk to her. Now, Ron LeClaire said she's a really good lady, so I'm hoping that she'll talk, right? So
Ron LeClaire also ran.
Everybody has their own opinion. I do hope she talks.
yeah, I hope she does too. I want to know her opinion, right? That's what I'm saying. There's a center to everything, right?
Mhm.
But you're not going to have anything. Just like with the lockout, when I said when I was with CBC and CTV and the other ones, and Druthers and Rebel News.
Yep.
There's a center here, but when you lock down, all it does is make both sides dig deeper.
Yep.
And how are you going to come to this? Canada wasn't built that way.
No.
They're running and hiding. But again, to really give the background to this, though, you attempted to contact Lisa Gretzky.
Oh yeah, yep. I did on the 16th before our protest of the school board. And no response, and I put my address, my everything you're supposed to do for your MPP. She is my MPP, but she hasn't responded.
So just hammer down now. There's going to be an event on July 10th.
July 10th, 3:00, Lisa Gretzky's
Put
office.
that back up, please, one more time.
Please bring signs that say "No secrets in school." Let kids be kids. Leave the kids alone, and or Great GEC DSB for Greater Essex County District School Board locks parents out.
So if you want to make signs,
Because I'm going to do a press release, so please bring signs with that verbiage only, so it doesn't get skewed.
and parents, if there's parents listening, and I would hope that most of you agree with the topics that we're talking about. But even if you don't, if this isn't something that you're agreeable with us, it shouldn't really matter, because if you're a parent and you have a child who goes to the public schools, you should, even if you haven't yet, you should want your voice heard. You should be able to have your point, even if it's not our point, be heard, listened to, acknowledged, and then
I'd love to have talks with people that are on the other side, because I want to understand the other side.
well, that's the thing. It's I've been trying. I tried to have the first thing I did when I pulled the camera out live at the last event was a couple came up to me trying to talk, and I was happy to engage and ask them questions, and I was trying to be as neutral and positive and relate. But the second they saw the pathway to the same, we were going to come to the same answer, right? And the second they saw that, and this is what usually happens, is the other party that I'm speaking with retreats and says, I'm not going to engage in this hateful rhetoric, or your bigotry, or whatever, a negative
They just think they're right.
tone.
You know what I mean? That's the problem. I'm willing to say I'm not right 100% of the time. I want to. What am I missing here? That's why you got to have those.
I think
Good for you, Steve, for doing that.
we got to discern though too
Try.
between the people who are our allies, people who are on this issue our enemies. They are. I mean, they have clearly identified themselves as our enemies. Now, I'm not.
I love your go.
I'm just saying, like when you kick us out of
How
the
do we
meeting,
know that? Is there somewhere we can look that hasn't? That
well,
doesn't
when you
change
shut
the
our
culture?
mics off, when you tell us, when you invite us to a meeting, shut us down, disrespect us, when we're talking and when we're leaving and saying that's fine, we're going to leave, and then you do the condescending bye-bye as we're walking out of the room, and then they won't come out of their room until we leave the building when we're just outside chatting. I mean, they have no interest in engaging. They have, and that doesn't mean that I think they're hopeless. It just means they have clearly stated their position. Then we have to discern allies, enemies, and then there are people who are a swing vote in between. Those are the people who are worth talking to, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I sit down and talk to a Gail Hatfield, a Sarah Sipkar, anybody, absolutely. But I am going to recognize the fact that you are on the other side of this, and that's okay. And I'll try, and we could try to hash this thing out, find a way to work through it. I mean, I'm sure I know Elton would be happy to talk to them.
So after the meeting, when they had that when you guys walked out. I wasn't even there. I sent an email out to Gail Hatfield because she finally did something with the books, I thought, which still nothing's happened from it.
She did mention an improvement.
And she said because I wanted to set up a time to talk with her. She goes out. I respectfully decline, and I appreciate your cooperation on this matter. She basically told me to go fly a kite,
What kind of
Yeah,
cooperation?
right? Which I've been nothing but. I'm trying to hold fighters back, right?
Well, no.
You know what I mean? And I want to have those. We need to have those hard talks.
Yeah.
But yes, you are right. They are shutting down.
I think
Sorry,
Journey's
I
talking
didn't
about
know.
accountability.
Yes,
right?
no, 100%.
Yeah, there's something to having a good, like, you know, to have, just like Daniel said in his speech, he's like, whether they give somebody, you know, you come into that meeting, somebody expresses their disapproval, even their disgust with you. If you get, you know, glaring looks, if you get the side eye, you know what? Deal with it. You're a public representative. None of us were doing that. But when they started to shut us down, when we started asking, like, why, you know, you could kind of hear it in the gallery when they were shutting us down. It's like, that's because you have crossed the line. And we're telling you, you've crossed the line. So 450 people show up, we're telling you, you crossed the line. We're going to Lisa Gressy's office to tell her, they have crossed the line, you need to represent.
Even AM 800's poll, which most of their listeners are left leaning. I can't remember now, and I don't want to, but I think it was around 83%, 83 to 17%. When they asked the question, they polled the question about, do you think it was right for the?
It was 69% on our side, 31% on their side.
That was the final
That
tally.
was the final tally.
So even on their poll, it's clear cut. If you take that number, that percentage in any other poll, it's clear cut. You know, a pass in school is 50%. What was it?
69.
69 is
Call it 70.
way over. I mean, it's not an A+,
We know
but
the biggest
it's no discussion about failure.
But when doing a poll, that is a strong majority.
And that poll was 2,300 people. On the secret policy, it was 9,300 people that responded. So people are.
I know the numbers were higher.
Yes, and the numbers were higher.
Yeah, to keep keeping secrets.
Because people are engaged, but now they've gone dead on the lines.
Yeah. And
right? They're
hopefully,
not talking about it.
and hopefully
Yeah, we're
because of
missing
this
that one.
last Jericho walk that turned into a protest, counter-protest, because the mainstream narrative that tried to push a clash at this event. Hopefully, because God works through everyone and everything.
Amen.
So hopefully, because of their own actions, more parents, more of the public will have they'll begin to have a 360 bird eye view of what's going on, which hopefully will garner them to ask a question. And all it takes is a question. You ask one question, it usually leads to more questions.
Speaking of that, if you get on my email list, what I'm starting to do in September, because I started doing it more at the end of the year, is I'm taking the agenda and going through it myself and seeing points that people can talk to do a quick view. I feel those are very important points, and I think you would agree too, right? When I do that?
Yeah.
But take another view on your own after, right? And I'm hoping more and more people get involved in that. But if you get on my email list, you'll be on that email list to do that. So that's elton.robinson1984@gmail.com, and I'll put you on the Parents for Parents' Rights email list.
Say the email again to
Elton, ELTON .Robinson, ROBINSON, 1984-1984
all right.
And one more resource, since we were talking about books, and we mentioned it before, we'll mention it again, is booklooks.org. BOOKLOOKS.org. Find a title, put it in there, you know, and then search for the report, read it, and you'll see, like, if you go to This Book is Gay, I think it was page 102, where they tell you about how to, you know, argue against Christians and all that stuff, and Jesus would have gone all the pride marches. It's like, well, not for the reasons that you're saying, that's for sure. But, you know, it's another resource. Go look, you know, because the evidence is compelling. If all it is sound bites, you know, as good as the Truth Trumpet is, but if all it is sound bites, and you're hearing it from Elton, from Stephen, from Jay, from whoever else, that's great. Maybe it gets you motivated to go take the next step, but you have to show up at a protest, or you know, or hopefully when they reopen,
Yes.
the
Don't take my word. Use
the
your words
the,
as well.
the school board, come sit in the gallery and just observe, or go look up these books and see for yourself how bad it is. That will be motivation in and of itself.
Absolutely. How bad it is, and how much, even if you're inclined to think these gentlemen, they can't be telling the truth. You don't have to trust us. What I used to say in high school and beyond for a little bit to girlfriends or girls is, and it was genuine from my heart. I could say trust me, right? But everybody says trust me. You don't have to trust me. Just stick with me and you'll find out you can trust me by my actions and looking at my heart and the fruits that I bear. And it's always worked out for me because I don't want to burn people's trust. So without going off on a tangent there, don't trust what we're saying. Look up what we're saying and find out yourself. Look at the resources that are being provided to you here and compare it with whatever resources you currently have and see where the truth lies.
And that's how I found the truth to this. Was I was at the parent council, and the one lady was talking about books, which I didn't really care about the books until down the road. But one person talked about litter boxes and furries in one school that my daughter went to, and then the same person talked about a kid that identifies as a cat at another school that my other daughter goes to. So I went and researched, and that's when I stumbled upon that policy.
And on that, like, so some people think to themselves, like, well, you know what? If that's where that person's at, then you got to say, hey, that's okay. But that is apathy, and that is complacency. And that truly is hateful, is to allow somebody to live in their lie. That is hateful. When you know there's something better out there, you tell them the truth because you love them.
Absolutely.
So it is actually 180 opposite from what I guess we would say, our counter protesters or people on the other side would be claiming.
Yeah.
Is that by telling the truth, you're showing that you love them, and we're not trying to force it on you, but don't force your stuff on me either.
Well, exactly. And I mean, the litter box thing is a good example, at least right now.
We haven't found one yet, just to be clear.
No, well,
but there are furries in the school.
There are.
There
I
is a
know
cat
they've talked about it in
cat.
policy. I've read in America and here.
Yes.
It's written in policy, and it's going to be put in place.
Well, that's
as
the
long as it's
accommodation part
trained.
is on that policy.
Yeah, as long as the ball keeps rolling down this way, but it's not normalized yet. So right now, I can use that as an example of lunacy because a lot of people can at least currently go, yeah, that's a little going too far. 2 years from now, if nobody steps in and stops this,
Oh, buddy.
the same conversation, most people listening will be like, well, it's normal. It's been in a school for 2 years after all, or a year, or however long it is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have people who identify as a cat and need a litter box, and how many adults do you know that still use suckies, soothers, susus?
I know some who should. I'm just saying.
But you get my point is,
But
if we identified as someone, if we identified as having I want a sucky, I'm a baby, I want to soothe it. There are people who do that, but most parents, if you showed up at work and someone was just like, "What's up, Bob?" Right? You would be thinking at the very least, and probably not putting your trust in that person, but you'd be thinking, what's going on mentally with that person? It's not professional. It's not what adults do, right? Everybody would think that. Everybody would think that. It's the same thing with litter boxes. We're not cats. What do you do with a child that you stroke the ego of them and say, okay, you're a cat. Here's your litter box. Do you assume they grow out of it like the sucky, or are they just going to get a bigger litter box? Or are we going to provide them as taxpayers with cat litter? Is it going to be organic or not organic? What are the furries and where do they lie on if you can use a chemical base or organic? Problems for them. But where does that seed end with that? Do you take it away? We all should be saying, this is crazy. We're not going to entertain these sort of things or pay for it as a taxpayer.
Yeah. So, final thoughts. Does he go first?
Elton, final thoughts.
I'll let you go first.
Oh, throwing it back at me. Okay. Well, what I'll say is that be engaged, get involved. Don't wait. The time is now. And people, I've said this before, I'll say it again. If you're people of faith, you go to church, and whether your leadership says it or not, have a good conversation with them. Take your church to the streets. There's nothing biblical about keeping your faith within the walls of your church, within the walls of your home. The Bible says that you're ambassadors, that to take it out to the public and to share it with people, not to force yourself on them, but to actually go out there and share the truth. And there is a plenty of opportunity to share the truth. There's plenty of lies that need to be destroyed and debunked, and it's time to get out there and go do it. And to realize that not only biblically is it on your side, but for those who maybe don't revere the Bible as we do here, to realize that these trustees are breaking the law. They are breaking the law. They're violating the Ontario Education Act. These meetings are intended to be public. They need to be public, and they are public representatives are elected, and so they need to actually represent the people within their constituents. So when Melinda Chin is speaking up, she's speaking up on behalf of her constituents. There is no place for a trustee to shut her down, whether they like what she's saying or not, and try to keep her from doing her job. That in itself is also wrong. So these trustees need to be respectfully put in their place, understand their role, and that they are the ones that this process comes back to. They're the ones who answer to the public. They're the ones who actually have to lead this process, but they do it by actually engaging the parents, listening to the parents, the children, of course, but the parents are the caregivers. There's a reason why God blessed children with parents. And the Bible says, honor your mother and your father. It doesn't say honor the school board. Amen. Or any administrator, Stephen Liche, anybody. It says honor your mother and your father. And the school board needs to do that right now and quick. So I encourage you to get out there and make it happen and join us. And you'll actually find you meet a lot of cool people.
Well said, Jay. Elton, final thoughts?
Thank you very much, Steve, for the time.
You're welcome.
Pleasure all the time with Jeremy. Thank you, Beth, for taping the thing and putting up with us. Please come out July 20th, or not July 20th, sorry, July 10th, Monday. This Monday at Lisa Gretzky's office. Be there at 3. Please come out and see me. If you want to get involved with Parents for Parents' Rights, we're starting a board in August. So if you want to get engaged, come on out, and you don't even have to be fully engaged. A lot of hands make a lot of light work, right? So please, please, please. And if you have an issue again with your child at school, please reach out to Jeremy, Steve, or myself, and let us guide you through the process. Don't go in there blind. We've had so many different stories that if you're interested in anything we've said, please reach out to me at my email to have a conversation.
All right, guys. Appreciate you, Elton and Jay, for coming on again and talking about this major issue that's currently happening in our schools, our public school sector. The last thing I'd like to say is for parents, trustees, teachers, everybody, it's time that we start utilizing our heart. Right? Start actually when you're being presented with some of these choices going on in life or at the schools. It's time to activate your heart and don't just say, I'm doing the right thing because I've been told. Everyone is expressing it's the right thing, so I don't even have to think about it. But if you would activate your heart for a second, think about what you were like as a child and how this very thing would have altered the path of your life, or think about your child itself and what you would do if the things we're saying are true and your child is subjected to this, and how your child will turn out as they progress or get older. It's time to activate the heart, guys, and stop just following protocol, procedure, and policy. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but just to blindly follow these things without looking in your heart and morally giving yourself a check and reminding yourself on what's right and wrong. That's what I think we need, all of us need to do. I try to do on a daily basis. We all should do that. Having said that, thank you for viewing us here at the Truth Trumpet. You can always email us as well at thetrutthtrumpet@hotmail.com. And once again, I appreciate you guys being on.
Thanks, Stephen.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
thank you, sir.
And we'll see you again next week here with another great interview on the Truth Trumpet. Take care.